Hey friends, I wanted to say hi, touch base for our weekly video check-in and make a couple of announcements and just cue you in mostly to some big assignments that are coming up in about 2 weeks, namely your midterm paper, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about. But firstly, I just wanted to say your second short writing assignments are in, and I will be grading them this week. Holla. You will not have any more short writing assignments before the midterm and before our spring break. So that's awesome. You'll do two more after the break, and I'll definitely announce them, about a week in advance, like I've been doing, to let you know when you're going to have them. If you completed and submitted your first short writing assignment and you did not get back a grade or my comments, then contact me immediately because I definitely didn't get it and there probably was some kind of submission glitch. As you all know, Sakai can be a little bit fussy and annoying. So something I'm going to suggest, the bulk of you have no problems, but for those select handful of you who have problems submitting your work, I'm going to suggest that you actually complete your assignment in like a Google Docs, in either Google Docs or Word, and then upload it and also copy and paste it into the actual text box on Sakai. This way you're kind of like covering all bases. You have an uploaded file and your work saved, and you also have, the work in the text box if for some reason the upload doesn't go through. I know that seems like it's going to be sort of time consuming, but I think really it probably would take, a minute to quickly copy paste and upload. And plus you have those extra 5 minutes kind of built into your time, which is really designed to handle all of these little submission hiccups. The time that that's the time that Sakai takes to process, your upload and your submission kind of is built in those 5 minutes. So really at 30 minutes, you should be, you should stop writing and you should turn your attention to making sure that your work is actually saved, it's in the text box, it's been uploaded, and that you give yourself a good minute or two to, make sure that everything submits through. If for some reason you're having a problem, if you've done everything right and you've completed your work, you've submitted, and something isn't going through, you don't get a confirmation, whatnot, take a screenshot. Take a screenshot of your computer so that I can, see that actually there has been a problem, and really so that I can see like what messages are coming up for you, so that I can maybe try to troubleshoot them with like tech support, Sakai tech support, so we can kind of figure out why that's happening. Okay, again, the bulk of you are having no problems, but for those of you who have run into a little hiccup, it's hard for me to, accommodate a couple of you who aren't getting the work in on time. It's not really fair to the others who are. Although I do understand that things happen in computers and technology are annoying sometimes and shit happens. So make sure that you're copying, pasting into your text box, also uploading. And if you are having a problem, take a screenshot of your computer so that I can kind of see what's going on and we can maybe figure it out. So that's the first thing about short writing assignments. Secondly, as I'm sure you've noted, your midterm prompts have been posted. They are posted under the assignments tab. I've given you about 4 prompts, and they seem long, but I've really tried to like give you a basic question where I highlight a certain theme. Kind of pulled out some of the thematics that we've been discussing that we've seen throughout the course of the semester thus far in the various, amount of text that we've read. And then I've kind of expanded upon it just to sort of situate some of these texts and put them in conversation with one another in a sort of critical context, so you can get a sense of how you might start to, pair some of these texts up. These are just suggestions. You can put any text that we've read thus far, into conversation with another one, that we've read. And some of you have asked, like, well, can I compare like fairy tales? You can if you make sure that you're doing like, a Grimm's Brothers fairy tale in addition to like Perrault and Carter. you could do, because they're coming from different cultural influences, different time periods. This is a comparative literature course, so we really are trying to, look at texts that um, come from different cultural backgrounds, come from different periods in history, and see how they actually can uh, enter into a dialogue with each other in an interesting and critical way. Um, so again, I'm trying to kind of like put some of these texts together that I think kind of resonate with one another in relation to the theme, but you have some flexibility to, kind of work on whichever text, you choose. Just make sure that you're localizing your argument to 2 texts, no more than 3. Why? Because this paper isn't that long. 3 to 5 pages, for a comparative critical analysis is really not that much space. And I feel like if you take on, too many different texts, what you're going to do is you're going to sort of like superficially handle all of them. I'd rather you kind of narrow your focus, to 2 or 3 and do a real, sort of critical deep dive into them. So that's sort of the goal. So that's really the main stipulation, is just like two texts, no more than 3 texts, to kind of examine within a paper. If you are going to choose the sort of like write your own prompt option, that's totally fine. But you should be contacting me, like now, like this week, really, with your ideas. So I would actually, kind of write out your own prompt, your own question, and then let me know, which texts you're thinking of writing on in response to that prompt. And this way I can just make sure that you're on the right track, tweak it if it needs to be tweaked a little bit, your question, just so that I know that you're kind of good to go and you're on the right path. So if you are thinking of writing on your own subject, or you're in response to your own question that I haven't covered, then this week, really email me so that we can have a conversation and make sure that you're good to go in that capacity. I did also send, I think I posted on announcements yesterday, 2 documents. One of which was a kind of paper guidelines, basically, some more detailed do's and don'ts for your more formal papers. So that's the XPOS teacher in me like can't help myself. So this is sort of a critical text to read through thoroughly, before you even attempt to sit down and write the midterm. Some of it will probably be somewhat obvious to you, because you are all, you've all been writing, papers for quite some time. But this is just a sort of guide to make sure that you know sort of exactly what I'm looking for in these papers, so that there are no real big surprises when I sit down to grade them. And the other one was about your thesis. So review that as well. I'm also going to send around a kind of like 2 sample thesis statements, one of which is more what I would consider like more informational or observational, something that is, sort of clear to most readers who read a text. Not many people would sort of take argument against, an assertion, an argumentative assertion, because it's more sort of like superficially observational rather than a real analytical thesis, which is more original and represents a sort of deeper level of, synthesis among the text and critical thinking. So I want to show you sort of the difference so that when you go to sit down and write your paper is sort of what I'm looking for. Let's just do like I'm going to just run through briefly the paper guidelines and just highlight, the most important things to keep in mind. So firstly, this paper is not a reading comprehension test, okay? This paper is, I'm going on the notion, it's already agreed that you've read these texts, right? We've been talking about them in our discussion forums. You're writing about some of them in a more, formal way in our short writing assignments. This is sort of another level of analysis and consideration. So this paper should be a close textual analysis of 2 and no more than 3 texts. You should not be summarizing what you've read. I've read these texts too. So again, we're going from the assumption that we've all read the texts. I'm less interested in what happens in the text. I'm more interested in how you interpret a certain moment in a text and how it relates to the prompt, how it relates to the question at hand, how it relates to the argument that you're trying to make. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you feel like the bulk of your paragraphs are basically just rehashing, sort of plot points, then you're not on track. One line, if you need to provide a little bit of context for a story, you get one line to do that. The rest should be your own sort of critical unpacking of the text, your own sort of interpretations of the text, and utilizing textual support by quoting from the text in order to support your ideas. Okay, that should be the sort of foundation of your body paragraphs. You should also obviously exhibit a clear and original thesis, like I just said. It should be original, unique, interpretive. It should be critical in nature, not observational. Someone should be able to say, that's interesting that you think that. I would argue this. There should be, and not even just, a counter argument. There should be multiple counter arguments. Someone could say, well, I think this. Well, I think this. Well, I think that. Well, I could see your point here, but I still see, the text in this capacity. So you want to make sure that you have actually an argument at stake. If you can say like, yeah, I think someone could argue this in a different way, then you know that you have an actual critical argument at stake rather than just an observational point that you're trying to make. You obviously want to cite from the text, and you want to cite smartly. Don't cite just to cite. You don't want to just be picking, sort of semi-random quotes out of these stories, out of these myths, and sort of, putting them in your paper and just sort of leaving them there. Okay? You want to make sure that the quotes that you're choosing are doing a lot of work for you, a lot of critical work for you, that they are actually supporting, what you are trying to say. I've had students, you cite claim something, cite from the text, and what actually they're citing is suggesting some contrary interpretation. So you want to make sure that the quotes that you're actually pulling are useful for your argument, okay? And don't just plop them in and move on. Your job as the writer is to actually unpack them, to tell the reader, explain to the reader how this quote actually helps to serve, support for your argument and for your thesis, okay? Your paper should have a title. The title can be simple. If it's quippy and catchy, great. Otherwise, it should just be more descriptive in nature. Tell me what this paper is about. And then obviously you should be proofreading your work. It's ridiculous that I have to say that, but I'm going to say it because I teach XBOZ and I see what comes in sometimes. What I tell all my students, literature students, XBOZ students, is to print out your papers and read them out loud. Even if you don't print them out, read them out loud. Why? Because it forces you to actually slow down and actually to pay attention to the words that are on the page. Our brains are very smart. Our brains autocorrect for us all the time. But you need to make sure that, you are doing that due diligence and presenting your work as clearly and as correctly as possible. A lot of sort of grammatical errors kind of weigh down a paper and can really detract from the value of what you're trying to say. So do yourself a solid and proofread your work. Read it to your dog, read it to your mom, read it to your dad, read it to your roommate, okay? Anybody. Read it to the dude on the subway. Just read it. Read it out loud. Take the time to slow down and pay attention to what's actually on the page and make sure that you are representing yourself in writing as accurately and as convincingly as possible. Okay. Again, your paper should avoid summary. Your paper should avoid redundancy. Once you make a point, you need to make it once, unpack it, and move on. So each body paragraph should have some kind of topic sentence in which you introduce the main idea the main argumentative point for that particular paragraph. And then after that, you should move on. The next body paragraph should have a different topic sentence. You should be sort of building on your argument, okay? If you feel like, this happens all the time. People get a great idea and you essentially in different ways just kind of echo what you've already said. And that's going to kind of stall your paper. So you really want to make sure, think about your laying out your argument as like laying out these building blocks that are sort of leading your reader towards, the pinnacle of your argument. Okay? That should be the goal. So really pay attention to your body paragraphs. Make sure that you are introducing a new point in each body paragraph to avoid that redundancy. And make sure that you're citing accordingly. Your paper should have proper in-text citation, and your paper should have a separate works cited page. Okay, this separate works cited page does not count towards your 3 to 5 page requirement. That separate works cited page does not count, but it should come at the end of your paper. And if you have questions on proper MLA citation, there's a link in your syllabus that will get you to a page that will help. It's a great guide. I'm going to post another link to another site that I use all the time for proper reference. So I will send that out tonight or tomorrow. So that's it. So your papers are due, midterm papers are due on the 9th, okay, March 9th, which is right before spring break at 5 p.m. You're going to upload it under assignments, okay? You'll notice that this week we are having our normal discussion forums on fairy tales. Ooh, so fun. We're going to discuss, three sets of fairy tales, actually. We're going to do the Grimm's Brothers to start, German persuasion, German influence. Then we're going to go to Charles Perrault, French influence. And then we're going to go to sort of a more modern, contemporary feminist retellings from Angela Carter. So juicy. So we're going to be doing that this week. And then you'll notice next week we are not reading any new material. That's not like a party week for you. That's a writing week for you. Okay? It's a writing week for you. Okay? What I'm offering is the opportunity for you all to send me an introductory paragraph no later than March 6th so that I have enough time to sort of read it and give you some feedback on it. So if you want that, you're not required to send me anything, but if I were you, I would. And just an introductory paragraph, and I'll be able to sort of read your thesis, see what text you're kind of thinking of putting in conversation with one another, and I'll be able to give you a little bit of guidance, telling you you're on the right track, or maybe asking you to consider some additional questions to help push your argument a little bit more sharply into focus. So that no later than March 6th, if you want to take me up on that opportunity to send me your introductory paragraph, and then the midterm papers are formally due March 9th by 5 p.m. right before spring break. So you get to party on spring break and I get to grade your papers. Somehow that doesn't seem fair, but alas, it is. Okay, so midterm papers, our current discussion forum on the fairy tales, or the first part of the fairy tales that we're reading, is up and running. I scanned Fairy Tale as Myth, which is from your one of your anthologies, Introduction to Mythology. I scanned those pages for you and posted them under your lesson. I think it's under week 7. So make sure you read the lecture and read that along with the Grimm's versions of the fairy tales. They are so terrifying. I'm not sure if any of you have read the original fairy tales, but these are not your Disney fairy tales. These are truly grotesque, terrifying, audacious stories that somehow, they weren't originally geared towards children, and you will see why. But we've bippity boppity booped them into PG versions that don't scare the shit out of kids, or me, frankly, adults. I think that's all. That's all I got for you right now. Okay, so I will check back in at the end of this week. Let's have a good discussion. Again, make sure you're reading through all the comments that are coming in, especially if you're posting on the tail end of our of the ends of our discussion forums so that you can be, again, pushing that conversation forward, introducing new ideas, and not sort of rehashing what we've already covered. I can hear my like insane children coming up the steps, so I'm going to sign off. Okay, I will talk to you in a week. Happy reading.